This hearing board of the APCD will come to order at 5:35 on 29 June 2015. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Bonsbach. Here. Board Member Herlock. Board Member Carmen. Here. Board Member Murphy.
Here.
And Board Member Stubblefield.
Here. All those planning to give testimony tonight, would you please stand and rise to be sworn in?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, tonight we will be hearing petition number 858. And the agenda and the title is, what is the name? Oh, where is it? Where's the name? Oh, Parker Hannafin Corporation. Would the petitioner's representatives please state your names and your positions or job titles for the record?
Sure. Tom Gentile, General Manager.
Ken Jones, Division EH&S Manager, Environmental Health and Safety.
Thank you. Would you like to present your petition now?
Yes. So first,
And can you talk into your mic?
sure. Let me move over here. Thank you. First, thanks for hearing our petition. As stated, my name is Tom Gentile. I'm the General Manager at Parker Hannafin, located at 2340 Eastman Avenue in Oxnard. I'm going to, if it's okay, I'll give a brief overview of the business, talk to you a little bit about our products, and then Ken will take you through the reason for the request for variance and some of the things that we've done. So, what we make at our location.
Okay?
Is that okay?
Everybody here okay over there?
You guys hear me okay? We manufacture industrial filters, life science filters, and food and beverage filters. So our filters go through, as you can imagine, people are actually drinking from them. They're in medical applications. So there's a very stringent quality standard applied to it. And with that comes enormous amounts of testing and quality standards that we have to follow. So whether it be for the equipment, the end product, the operators, training, validation, and all documentation all has to be in line and in order, excuse me, with every document, with every shipment that we make. That being said, Ken will talk to you a little bit more about some of the processes we have and the materials required to test them. But just as a general overview, that's what we do. That's our niche in the market. And Ken, I'll turn it to you if you're all right with that.
So talking about the reason for the variance, Parker Hannafin is looking for a variance to run a carbon absorption unit without the other unit in sequence. So what we'd have per our permit is 2 units, a 8,000-pound carbon vessel that our emissions go into from what we call bubble test operations, which uses some point 100% isopropyl alcohol, and at some point 60% isopropyl alcohol and a mixture of water. That's used for integrity testing of the filters. The emissions go into the first unit that's classified as an 8,600-pound carbon vessel. Then it goes into another one in sequence, which is a U.S. Filter Zabox 8000 model carbon unit, where the emissions are then scrubbed through these units and put out the stack into the environment. We found through a source testing through the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District that our number 1 unit, the 8,600-pound unit, was leaking. We stopped source testing at the time, and at that point we mitigated the issue through structural bracing, applying sealants to the roof line. We source tested again on 4 days after that event, and I can get the date. We source tested on May 14th with the unit repaired and received a pass with 99% of the emissions controlled from the unit. We put in place an inspection on this unit to make sure that the work we did to mitigate the issue was going to hold up, and after a certain point of time, it became obvious that the work that we did was not going to control the emissions. I went out one day and noticed that the control measures that we put in to mitigate were starting to bubble, and we found where it was again breaking through, at which point we notified the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District, informed them of this issue, and worked for this petition for a short-term variance while we try to correct this issue. So what we have done is we've been able to bypass that first unit so that none of the emissions are going into that, therefore going to the second unit, which is really why we're here, because that's where the petition, our permit states that we have to go through both carbon units in sequence. We have bypassed the first unit going directly to the second unit, the U.S. Filters Zabox unit. In doing so, we brought out a company called Horizon Air Measurements to source test again with just the single unit. In doing so, they went ahead and did that testing, and we found that we were at 93.1% control of emissions with 31.8 part per million of the ROC, reactivated organic compounds, coming out. Our permit requires a minimum of 90% capture of that, or control of those emissions. So what we have done is we've gone to a vendor to ask them to fabricate a new unit for us that's a much better unit. And while that unit is being fabricated, we are running everything through the single unit, the Zabox U.S. Filters unit, and inspecting that unit as well, while we're waiting for the petition to go through and correcting any of the potential downstream issues, such as changing out the carbon frequently so that we make sure we don't have saturation of the ROC, and putting together the petition to correct the unit. So I believe that's where we're at today. I don't know if I'm...
And we talked originally about it. Do we curtail it? Do we shut both units down? But that would effectively shut down end product. It's a test that's required by our customers, so there's no way we could effectively make the product without it. We looked at all different options. Is there a different type of solution we could run through without having the same emission? And our results were that we could not. So if we were to shut it down, we would have to shut down production.
Right. And shutting down production would be the loss of 20 direct jobs, approximately 20 direct jobs and 20 indirect jobs, of which amounts to 19% of our annual revenue by shutting down the source testing for our what we call our micro value stream. Looking at the OSHA permissible exposure levels for isopropyl alcohol, OSHA has a time-weighted 8-hour average for that at 400 parts per million. So an employee can be exposed up to 400 parts per million in an 8-hour time-weighted average. The current unit was putting out 31.8 part per million isopropyl alcohol. So we are quite a bit less than what the OSHA exposure is, just to show you that the what's coming out is not an acute hazard to individuals, or should not be an acute hazard to the environment as well. We are on a time frame to have the new unit installed within the 90-day short-term variance. We have a plan to, upon assuming approval of the short-term petition variance, that we would have the carbon that's in the unit that's not being used now removed and placed into the other carbon unit that we're using. It's fresher carbon, has less saturation. Remove the old carbon so we can keep that capture rate or that control rate high. Destroy the old unit, have a demolition crew come in, put down a new concrete pad for the new unit, have the new unit installed, have the electrical reinstalled, and then have a HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning company come in and do all the ducting. Upon conclusion of doing that and having new carbon put in both units, we would then contract again with Horizon Source Management and have it source tested again to verify the control of the emissions from the unit. One of the benefits we have to the community would be by continuing to run with the short-term variance. Not only do we not have the potential loss of 40 jobs, we continue to sell our product that sales tax originates in Oxnard, and the corresponding, obviously the wages and the taxes for the community would still continue to be occurred. And I don't know if there's anything else. We do have samples of our membrane, our filter products, and our filters if you're interested in looking at those to see what we're doing. Do you want me to pass them down? So that's one that's completed. That's before. This is the pleated material, and this is the membrane. The membrane we make in-house, and this we make with that. That's the pleated material that actually goes inside that. This is a double. These are used in the life science medical field, so we thought we'd send these off to you so you can get an idea of what we're doing at the facility.
So they're all made and assembled in a clean room type environment with, that's a class 10,000.
That's called membrane.
So we cast that right in the facility there.
Right. So that's cast. That's put in between the pleats there. That material is actually inside those pleated materials, and it has a certain pore size. The pore size determines how well that filter can capture contaminants. We go down to, I think, a 0.03 micron, which when you have a very small pore size, you need the isopropyl alcohol to reduce surface tension when you're doing testing.
To make sure those microns are the exact rating.
Yes. So that's one of the reasons. That's the reason we use the isopropyl alcohol. It's an industry standard. It is to help us with the diffusive test. We push air through the filters for an integrity test, and there is a meniscus in the pore, a water meniscus, and the surface friction, if you want to call it that, is so much that the isopropyl alcohol will reduce that surface tension, allowing so we don't blow it out real quick. And that way we can test to a certain PSI to make sure the filters are functioning and pass all of our quality integrity testing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, do any members of the board have any questions of the petitioner?
When you first received your permit, why are you required to have two separate units to filter everything out if the Zaybach filter meets the requirement of at least 90%? So,
well, that's a good question. And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer. That's when I was starting with the company, that's what the permit was written as. Prior to the carbon, there was a biological destruction of the emissions, and it wasn't working because biological destruction needs a very consistent flow, and it wasn't working, and we evidently petitioned to go to a full carbon unit, and they retrofitted that unit that needs to be replaced for carbon. So quite honestly, I don't know why there's two, but it's in the permit, and since it's in the permit, we need to adhere to the permit requirements.
And I think the logic is probably it's a backup, right? It's a safety net, just in case one goes down, you've got the other one there.
Right.
So you can continue production and nothing escapes into the environment.
Yeah. And assuming that we had the right system in place where we're working, say we had 90% destruction, or control, I should say, I got to get the vernacular right, control. We know that if it goes to the next unit, we get 90 off of that, and as we talked earlier, if that was 100 parts per million going in, now we're 10. If we have 90% more destruction, we're 1 part per million. Our last test, when both of them were working, we were around 3 to 5 parts per million coming out the stack. With the one unit, we're 31.8, so you can see the difference in that. So it's actually helps us reduce the total amount of reactivated organic compounds that's coming out.
And these are both carbon filters that you're talking
Yes, sir.
about?
Reactivated charcoal, carbon is typically coconut based.
And then, is this a positive pressure system? So, I mean, it maintains a pressure all the time?
Yes, sir.
When you have your permit, it says that you have to have an inspection once a year. Was this only discovered after it had been going on for a year, or is this something that you check on frequently?
My assumption that inspection is probably the source test inspections. When the unit is running, there's nothing visible that lets you know that it was leaking. There's motors that push around 1,500 cubic feet a minute of air through, so it's a high volume of air. It's really loud. Our guys would walk out there and make sure the motors were running, make sure the ducting was all in place, nothing obvious. There was no idea that the roof was leaking where it was leaking. It was not something that you would look at and say, well, it's leaking there. In fact, it took us a while to find it with the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. The way we found it was the amount of CFM going into the unit was much higher than what was coming out. So where does the extra air go? And at that point, and you didn't hear it because of the loudness of the units, it was actually a physical walking around and then put our hand up and, wow, feel that, it's leaking right here. So at that point we stopped it. Now going forward, we're going to put PMs in place for the new units to do inspections of our units to make sure there's not any issue as such as this. But this is a totally different unit than the one we have in place now. This is fully steel, completely enclosed, where this one is concrete with a fiberglass roof that looks like it was added on after the fact, or maybe retrofitted.
Preventive maintenance.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Preventive maintenance plan to walk out there, visually inspect,
Right.
check.
Okay, but do you have anything to measure the parts per billion?
No, that's done through source testing. What we do have is we have a flame ionization detector that goes onto the unit, and what it does is it measures the parts per million going in and the parts per million going out, and it's measured every 10 minutes. We do sampling, and it's kept 24 hours a day onto a log on our server. So that's one way we can measure that as well.
So will you have a curve that you follow for cubic feet per minute? When you do your PMs, are you talking about PMs once a day, or are you talking about once a month, or what will your inspection rate be to assure that you continue to pull as much pollutant out as you can?
That would have to be discussed. When we talked about it earlier, and we just talked informally, we thought a once a week would be sufficient. Again, this is a fully enclosed unit. It'll be a brand new unit, and the other unit is fairly new as well, the U.S. Filter Zabox unit. And those units, the chances of those leaking are minimal at best. They're all welded, shut tight, painted, real strong integrity of the units. Where we would look at would be the ducting that goes in and out. That would be probably our highest potential for leakage. So we do a weekly visual inspection on those, is what we informally discuss. It hasn't been put in writing yet. It was just an informal discussion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole point is to keep the pollutants
No doubt.
on the charcoal and not in the air. So
Correct.
If that isn't happening other than once a year, that isn't is not a good thing,
Agreed.
in my opinion.
Agreed.
Okay, thanks.
Do any other members of the board have any questions of the petition?
Just for
Mr. Murphy?
personal curiosity, both of these, the Zobach system and they're both carbon absorption. What's the difference between the two?
The first unit that was leaking holds 8,600 pounds of carbon, and all it does is hold carbon. Carbon goes in the bottom. It's pushed through the air, velocity of about 1,500 CFM. Comes out the top, goes into the next unit where it goes into the bottom, and I believe it has a control system. The US Zbox is an actual control system as well, and I believe, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% familiar with how the control system works, but it's capturing that ROC in that process, so they're worked in succession to each other, with the US filters actually having the stack on top. And there could be, and I can't answer for 100%, there could be a control system inside that as well. I just know that when we do source testing on this, and the years that we've done source testing that we have since we put carbon in have been up in the 98, 99% control of those emissions. So
When they're both working?
when they're both working, right? Yes, sir.
When you tested after you just started using the Zebach system and you got 92 or 93%, is when you do testing, is it consistent? If you tested it today and you found 92%, you'd be pretty sure that when you tested it 1 week later, it would also be 92%? Or is there a fluctuation in test results?
As time goes on, the carbon becomes saturated with the reactivated organic compounds, so that control will drop. That's part of why we use a flame ionization detector to allow us to look at that. What we've learned over time is if we change if we change the carbon approximately every 14 to 16 weeks in that time frame, we stay well within our permits. So we just go ahead and make the commitment to spend the capital to change that on a regular basis. What that does too is our cells have remained pretty consistent, especially across the board in our area. I don't know about, maybe Tom can elaborate on the cells from micro, if it's gone up or not.
Yeah, they've gone up, and the life science side has been consistent year in, year out.
Right. So we're able to by purchasing on a consistent basis and working with our vendor who sends me emails saying, hey, it's been 12 weeks, let's get some more carbon. We set up a PO, a revolving PO. It costs us about $18,000 per change out. We do that 3 to 4 times a year. And that's one way we use this control method, because that has seemed to work very well for us. If we consistently change out the carbon on that time frame, we can keep the numbers well within our 90% control.
On the repairs that you are doing now, or the replacement, what is the dates that you expect this to all be done by?
Pending approval of the variance, we've already been on the phone with the vendor that's going to provide us with the new unit that they're going to fabricate. There is a 6 to 8 week lead time to have that constructed and shipped to our facility. During that 6 to 8 weeks, the first thing we're going to do is contact the same company and have the carbon that's in the vessel that we're not using pumped out and the carbon in the USA box replaced with the other carbon. So it's not as saturated as much, so we can continue to adhere to a greater than 90%. Once that's done, then it's our intent to remove the electrical panel, remove the ducting. We have a construction crew that's going to come in and provide demolition on the existing unit. It's pretty much, I'm going to go off the top of my head, 19.5 feet by 6.5 feet by 8 feet of 6-inch concrete with a fiberglass roof. We're going to have that tore down. We're going to put in a new 20 by 12 concrete pad with reinforced rebar that can support 15,000 pounds of weight. Or actually, I should say, it could support, I think it was 25,000 pounds of weight.
What's the cure time for that concrete pour?
I don't know, sir. I would. It depends on the weather. I would think last time they poured for us, which was a couple weeks ago, I think it was about 4 days. Yeah. So gives us ample time to get the pour in place, and then we just wait for the unit to be fabricated and sent out. When it's fabricated and sent out, we have to have the electrical installed and the ducting installed and have the new carbon put out, and then work with Horizon Air Measurement to do source testing again once the new system's in place and all the new carbon's in.
What's the date that you intend to have that done by?
By September 27th.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Kern?
Just reading your report, I was struck by one paragraph that said that you had an 87% emission that was leaking to the carbon absorption filter. Now, it says that leaking through the seals and through the seams of the vessel. Wasn't anybody in the plant aware of the smell of the alcohol to report you before you have to wait to a regular testing?
There was no smell of alcohol out there. There was nothing that was part of or a factory that would bring you to say, wow, we could smell it. There was no smell whatsoever, neither by none of us in the facilities department, EH&S, nor the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District could smell any type of APA.
Did they go to the plant, the air pollution at times?
Go through our plant, inside our plant? No, because the unit is actually outside the plant,
Yes.
the carbon unit.
Well, see, the thing I have with alcohol, it's that it's heavier than air. So it doesn't go up, stays close to the ground. That's one thing. And two is that the odor threshold for alcohol is very low. It's like 22 parts per million. So it's very little alcohol that it needs to get you that pungent smell that you get from alcohol. This is just rubbing alcohol, and the one you buy it is of the same strength, and if you put it on, you get quite a whiff. Now here, you got a plant that you're using about 45, you're leaking about 45 pounds per hour, if this thing is correct. Because it tells you that what's happening is that what's 5 pounds, 0.18 is the permissible that you can release. Well, if 5.18 is what you can release, 100% is 51 pounds, and if you say 87% of that is 45 pounds per hour of alcohol that drops into the ground and nobody smells it. That's what I'm finding that is kind of strange.
We didn't smell any alcohol. We had no idea that it was leaking until Mr. Stan Cowan with the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District brought it to our attention that the CFM going in was 87% going in was only 13% what was going out.
Yeah, no, because if that's if there was leaking in the other one, it was smelling, you have some problem there.
Yeah.
Your hazard control program, I don't know if it's up to date that nobody was smelling it or.
I can tell you, we have a walking path right by it. I walk by it every day, and I mean, if I were to smell, you can't smell anything. And again, the gentleman from the county couldn't smell it either. And standing right there doing the test, you'd think you'd smell it and say, "Whoa, there's alcohol here. This is a potential hazard."
45 pounds per hour, that's a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, and you're right. You put the stuff on your hands, I can smell it in a second. I can tell you, I walk by it every day, and I would never have known. Yeah. You think it'd be pungent all through the area there with that amount?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, if the inspector was there, he would have walked right over and said, "Whoa, I don't even have to test it. I can smell that alcohol." But there was no scent. Yeah. Just I'm with you.
because you had to wait until the test was done before you took action. And, if it was that pungent smell was available, action should have been taken immediately.
We would have taken immediate action on it, no doubt about it, no doubt.
The only thing is perhaps because the emissions go from the bottom of the tank of the vessel through the carbon and up to the top, perhaps it was captured in that tank first and before it went to the next.
No, but it says it was also through the seams of the tank.
Well, the seams of the tank are at the top.
Well,
It was on the roof line. It was only on the roof line that it was actually leaking. Around the, I have it here. Let me look real quick.
not in the connectors between tanks or anything like that.
No, around the seal on the top.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we did is we did structural bracing on the roof line, because that's where the issue was. I'm just trying to remember what direction-wise. It was south and north part of the vessel that was leaking out of primarily. There was some minor east and west where the seam is, but it was mainly out of the north and west where the unit sat there. We did structural bracing where we pulled the roofing together. We added special RTV tape, aluminum tape, did HVAC sealant around the whole thing, which seemed to work for short term. So actually the carbon did play a part in going through the carbon first. Maybe that's the reason we didn't smell it. I don't know. I just know that it wasn't, you couldn't smell any isopropyl alcohol during the time.
I have a couple questions. What's the tank made out of? Is it metal?
The tank is made out of concrete. So it's the new one or the old one?
The one that leaked?
Concrete. So it's concrete on 4 sides. It's 19 and a half feet long, 6.5 feet wide, 8 feet deep. And then on top of that, there was a fiberglass roof that was retrofitted to fit on top and then sealed onto the concrete. And that's where the leaking began.
I was just going to, is that where the leak was?
Yes, exactly, on the roof line.
So the sealant failed somewhere.
Yes, and what we believe happened is over the course of time, the exposure to sunlight and the conditions just caused whatever RTV they put in there to become brittle, maybe through the UV light. And with the amount of pressure at 1500 CFM going through, it had enough pressure to start making the integrity of that seal diminish.
And from when you installed the roof with RTV and it adhered to the top of the concrete container, how long did it operate before it started leaking?
I mean, from our repairs or when it was originally,
From when you originally put it together?
I can't answer that. I wasn't working for the company
Oh, so
then.
it's years.
Oh, it's been years. It's been there for several years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know when the biological destruction ended and they went to carbon. I can't answer that. I mean, I could find out for you, but I really don't know the time frame. When I came to work for the company, all the testing was done through carbon. It was done a year ago, at which point we passed our source testing at the time, so there was no reason at that time to think there was any issue. And then when we had this test with the difference in CFM going in and coming out, that's when it became an issue.
So the leak was probably a result of the pressure?
I definitely believe pressure, that 1500
Breakdown
CFM,
of the RTV.
right,
time.
and a combination of weather conditions and maybe they didn't use the right RTV. I don't know. Yeah. But with the unit we want to put in place, won't have that. It'll be all one solid unit. Won't have to worry about any joints failing, any roof added on. I think that was a retrofit. Just looking at what I could find, some of my searching, talking to the last manager who told me that it was biological and they retrofitted to the carbon. That's the best that I can come up with before coming to the meeting today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any other members of the board have any questions of the petitioner?
I have one question. Will you put in flow meters in the front and in the beginning and end of your system that you could know on a daily basis whether you have 1,500 going in and 1,500 coming out? I mean, because
Yes.
you know you don't have to put a flow meter that covers the whole thing, just a little flow meter, and they're cheap, and it'd be an easy way to follow whether or not you have a leak.
Yes, and that was discussed as well in that informal discussion of how we plan to mitigate any potential issues going forward. We talked about preventive maintenance schedule, how often do we want to walk out there and look, and that was brought up our maintenance lead in saying, you know, we could put the flow meters on. And I'm sorry I didn't add this, but yes, that was discussed as well. Because as you said, you don't need some huge device. You can just get something that's going to capture the CFM in and the CFM out, and then be a good warning system if something is, if there's a major differential in the two. So, thank you.
Okay, no further questions from the board. Does the district have any questions of the petitioner?
No, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to clear up a couple of things. We're not looking at 45 pounds per hour. The total permitted emissions from this facility for everything is 5.18 pounds per hour. There was a source test done on June 11th, and that was the test done where they tested just the one vessel, and the pounds per hour going into the control device, according to this source test, was 1.4 pounds per hour. So you could assume, we can make the assumption that 87% of the 1.4 might have been leaking out of the stack. So it was a much lower concentration than 45 pounds an hour. They don't have huge concentrations going in. There was only 398 ppm going in to begin with. So it's a lower concentration than you would think. And then also, that vessel that failed used to be a biological system. They had some kind of media, I think wood chips, and then bugs in there, microbes, and those systems have to have, everything has to be perfect, and it has to be constant. And the problem with a plant like this is if you're shutting down on the weekends, you're not getting a constant food to the bugs. When I used to inspect this site, it was a long time ago. They were using that system, and it was giving them a lot of trouble. So they decided to go with something a little more traditional, and that's the reason why when you look at the permit kind of describes these things as if they are two different units, but they're actually pretty much the same. They're just, one of them was put in as carbon, and then one of them was a unit that they basically converted over. And these are in series because generally carbon does have a breakthrough point where it'll work and it'll give you 93%, and then at some point it starts dropping off, and then it drops off a lot. So to have them connected in series means that even if the first one fails, you're going to get 90% control from the second one. So that's probably, I didn't write this permit, but I would imagine that that's why they require it going through two, so that if they do have breakthrough, they're not going to have an issue with it. So anyway, other than that, that's about it. I also would like to point out we have a couple of typos that are on this order. And I can point those out now. On page 2, item number 3, it says isopropanol alcohol. It's either isopropanol or it's isopropyl alcohol. So anyway, isopropanol alcohol is not correct. That should say isopropyl alcohol. And then we have a couple of other little typos. We just caught those today, so sorry about that. On page 9, for the reporting requirements, item number 4 says August 3rd. It should say August 10th. August 10th would be consistent with the August 10th date that's on page 8. And then for on that same page, for item number 6, there's a date it says that they have to submit a final report by October 2nd. Well, that's beyond the 90-day period for this order, so that should be changed to September 27th. And as far as I know, that's it for the typos.
Well, I have a question because
Yes, sir.
then your report is not too clear because in one part you say that 10% is permissible to release, right?
I'm sorry, 10%.
It's fine to release 10% of the fumes.
Yes, it's required to have 90% control
Right.
and required to go through both of the vessels.
Right.
And
10% you can, is permissible.
yes,
And here you said that permitted emissions are 5.18 pounds per hour.
okay, that's for the entire facility. There are a number of other things that they do there where they also have emissions. This is just a small portion of one part of the facility. They do a number of other things too, where they have.
Yeah, no, it wasn't clear because since we were talking of these filters, I thought it was all referring to the filters.
No, this 5 pounds per hour, 5.18 pounds per hour is
But
for.
the emission for the plant,
For the
plant.
entire facility, yes. And that includes a couple of degreasers, that includes,
That's a clarification that I needed, that they don't.
yeah. That includes what they call casting, and there's a preservation process which probably has a little bit of emissions. They have a number of different adhesives that are used that are not controlled. They have one degreaser, they have solvent cleaning, using the cloth. Sorry. But I'm actually looking at a source test where this is a draft of the test they did where what they do is measure it going in and then measure it going out. And it was, based on this last test that they did, it was 1.4 pounds going into that device. So I would estimate 87% of the 1.4 pounds went out the seams. So it was probably maybe at 1.2 pounds or so. So that's a much lower concentration.
Do any other members of the board have a question of the district?
You changed that to August 10th on paragraph 4 on page 9. And that says the due date for extending a petition to extend or modify it must be received by August 10th. And they're planning on getting this thing done by September the 27th. What happens if something unexpected happens between August 10th and September 27th? They can't do a petition to extend or modify it?
I'm not sure. I guess they would petition for a different type of a variance. It's our understanding that if they had to submit anything for a new variance, that it would be a regular variance. And because of the notice requirements, if you take the end of this and you go back roughly 45 days, it's a 30-day notice requirement, as you know, but with the time for the clerk and everything. I guess if they got past that date and there was a problem, we might see about some other kind of a variance where there was a shorter notice time, maybe some kind of emergency variance or something. I honestly don't know. I guess I would have to speak with county council and see what his opinion is.
Do any other members of the board wish to ask the district anything? Okay. Do any members of the public wish to comment? Okay, I'm going to call this hearing closed. Is there any discussion by the board? No discussion? Okay, well, hearing that there's no discussion, is there a motion concerning the petition? Okay, Dr. Bonsbach has moved that we grant the petition. Second?
I second it.
Mr. Carmen, second. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Bonsbach. Board Member Murphy.
Aye.
Board Member Carmen,
Aye.
and Board Member Stubblefield.
Aye. Your petition has been granted.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your time and consideration.
Pleasure working with you.